The transport ship Meadowlark moved through the darkness of space like a gentle giant. Inside its white corridors, children laughed and played while their parents talked about the new world waiting for them. New Tasmania would be their home, a place where they would grow food and build houses under alien suns. 847 people carried dreams in their hearts as the ship traveled through the empty space between stars. Captain Sarah Chen sat in her command chair, watching the screens that showed nothing but stars and darkness. She had made this journey 12 times before. It was supposed to be safe. This was neutral space protected by the Galactic Council. No one attacked civilian ships here. That was the rule everyone followed. The alarm screamed through the ship without warning. Sarah's hands moved fast across her controls. The screens showed 3 ships coming at them, moving like hunters chasing prey. She knew those shapes. Krevnath raiders. Her blood turned cold. All hands, battle stations, she said, trying to keep her voice calm. But there were no battle stations on a civilian ship. They had no weapons, no shields strong enough to stop military fire. Send the distress signal all frequencies. Tell them we are unarmed civilians. The communications officer's fingers shook as he sent the message out into space. Maybe someone would hear. Maybe someone would come. The Krevnath ships surrounded the Meadowlark like wolves around a wounded deer. Sarah knew what would happen next. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Krevnath. They were raiders and slavers. They took what they wanted from anyone weaker than them. The Galactic Council always condemned their actions, always promised to investigate, but nothing ever changed. The first impact shook the ship. Emergency lights turned everything red. Somewhere below, people were screaming. Sarah heard explosions, felt the ship dying around her. She opened the communication channel to the raiders. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth transport ship Meadowlark. We are unarmed civilians. We have children on board. Please, we will give you our cargo. Just let my people go. A face appeared on her screen. The Krevnath commander had 4 eyes that looked at her like she was nothing. Its mouth parts moved in what might have been a smile. Humans, it said in broken galactic standard. Weak, soft, good slaves. We have families here. Children, please. We know. The screen went dark. More impacts. The hull was breaking. Sarah heard the sound of metal tearing, air rushing out into space. Emergency doors slammed shut, cutting the ship into sections. In some of those sections, people were trapped with no air, no hope. The raiders boarded through the holes they had blown in the hull. Sarah watched her security cameras as armored Krevnath soldiers moved through her ship, shooting anyone who resisted. They grabbed people, dragging them toward their ships. Families were torn apart. Children cried for parents who would never answer. Sarah stood up from her chair. She had to try something, anything. She walked to the main airlock where the Krevnath commander was coming aboard. Around her, the bridge crew looked at her with terrified eyes. "Captain, don't," her first officer said. "If I don't try to negotiate, everyone dies," Sarah answered. The airlock opened. The Krevnath commander stood there with 6 soldiers behind it. It was bigger than Sarah had expected, covered in dark armor that had marks from 100 battles. "I am Captain Sarah Chen," she said, standing as straight as she could. "I ask you, by the laws of the Galactic Council, to take our cargo and leave. These people have done nothing to you." The commander moved closer. It was so much taller than her. "Galactic Council," it said, and made a sound like laughing. "Weak. Like you. Like all soft species who hide behind laws. Then what do you want?" "Everything." Sarah saw it pull out a weapon. She saw it point at her chest. She thought about her daughter Emma, only 8 years old, probably hiding in the children's section right now. She thought about her husband who had died 3 years ago. Maybe she would see him again soon. "The galaxy will know what you did here," Sarah said. "The galaxy knows what we do. The galaxy does nothing." The weapon fired. Sarah felt heat, then cold, then nothing. The Krevnath broadcast her death on all frequencies. They wanted everyone to see what happened to those who resisted. They wanted fear. By the time they finished, 293 people were dead. The rest were taken to the raider ships, forced into cages, marked as property. The Meadowlark floated in space, empty and broken, a tomb drifting in the darkness. The distress signal kept broadcasting. It reached other ships, other stations, other worlds. It reached the Galactic Council chambers where ambassadors gathered for emergency sessions. They spoke words of sympathy and promised investigations. They had done this before many times for many species. The signal reached Earth. In the council chambers, the Earth ambassadors sat quietly while others spoke. The Zalani representative expressed deep sorrow. The Thrax observer offered to help hunt the raiders. The council voted to condemn the attack and demand the return of hostages. Ambassador Rodriguez from Earth said nothing. He just listened, his face showing no emotion. When others asked if Earth would speak, he stood slowly. "We will respond," he said. "Please give us time." Then he left the chamber. Behind him, the other ambassadors looked at each other with confusion. That was not how these situations worked. There were procedures, negotiations, demands for compensation. There was supposed to be anger, maybe threats of sanctions or embargoes. This quiet was something different. Across the galaxy, no one understood what it meant when humans went quiet. They would learn. The Galactic Council expected procedures. When a civilian ship was attacked, there were steps that every species followed. First came the public mourning, then demands for compensation, then negotiations, sometimes an embargo, maybe a small military action against one raider base, but always talking, always diplomacy. That was how civilized species handled tragedy. Earth went silent. For 72 hours, no human spoke at the council. No demands were made. No press conferences were held. Earth's ambassadors disappeared from their offices. Human ships stopped broadcasting on standard channels. It was as if humanity had simply vanished from galactic affairs. In the council chambers, the other species grew concerned. The Zalani ambassador, a being that looked like a blue deer with 6 legs, spoke quietly to her aide. "Should we check on them? The humans must be in shock, losing so many at once, especially the young ones. Perhaps they need help with their grief." The aide checked his data pad. "Our embassy on Earth reports that everything appears normal. People are going to work. Ships are flying, but their government has activated something called Protocol Tartarus. Our translators say it means a place of deep punishment in human mythology. Strange. But grief makes people do strange things. They will ask for our help soon." She was wrong. What the Zalani did not know, what none of the species knew, was that humanity had been preparing for this day since they joined the Galactic Council 23 years ago. They had hoped it would never come. They had worked hard to make sure it would never come. But they had prepared anyway. On Earth, in a room deep underground, Fleet Admiral Okonkwo stood before a wall of screens. Each screen showed military assets that officially did not exist. Ships that had been built in secret, weapons that had never been tested in public, soldiers trained for a war that everyone thought would never happen. "Confirm status of all fleets," she said. "1st through 7th fleets at full readiness, Admiral. 8th fleet completing final preparations. All stealth carriers are in position." "Intelligence reports?" A younger officer brought up new screens. They showed maps of Krevnath space with hundreds of red dots marking locations. "We have confirmed positions for all major Krevnath military installations, leadership locations, and suspected hostage-holding sites. Our assets have been tracking their movements for 6 years. 6 years. That was how long humanity had been quietly watching the Krevnath. Every raid they committed, every ship they took, every slave they sold. Humanity had watched and documented everything. Not because they wanted war, because they wanted to be ready if war became necessary. The Krevnath had made it necessary. Status of the kinetic weapons? Launched 4 weeks ago, Admiral. They will reach their targets in 37 hours. Okonkwo nodded. 4 weeks ago, Earth had launched hundreds of missiles moving at a significant fraction of light speed. They carried no explosives, no fancy warheads. Just metal moving so fast that impact would release energy like a nuclear weapon. And they had been aimed at every major Krevnath military base before the Meadowlark was ever attacked. That was the terrible truth. Earth's intelligence had predicted an attack was coming. They had seen the Krevnath raiding patterns, analyzed their targets, calculated probabilities. They knew civilian ships were at risk. They had warned their own ships to be careful, increased patrols, done everything they could. But they could not protect everyone everywhere, so they had prepared for what would happen if prevention failed. "Send the message," Okonkwo said. Across every frequency, in every language spoken in the galaxy, a message went out. It was not from the Earth ambassadors or the human president. It was from the military, and it was simple. "To the Krevnath Dominion, you have 24 hours to return all hostages taken from the Meadowlark, unharmed, to neutral space. You have 24 hours to surrender all individuals involved in the attack for trial. If you do not comply, we will come for them. This is your only warning." In Krevnath space, the message was received with laughter. The Dominion's war leader, a massive creature covered in scars from 1,000 battles, watched the human message with his officers. "The monkey species makes demands," he growled. "They have no military fleet. Our intelligence says they have only a few dozen warships. We have thousands. What will they do? Send angry words?" His officers laughed with him. Humanity was known across the galaxy as peaceful traders. Their ships were slow and unarmed. They solved problems with talking and money, not violence. Everyone knew this. "Send reply," the war leader ordered. "Tell them we keep what we take. If they want their people back, they can pay 100,000 credits per human. And tell them if they try anything, we will kill the hostages slowly." The message went back to Earth. In the underground command room, Okonkwo read it without expression. They refused. "Yes, Admiral." "Then we proceed as planned. All units execute Protocol Tartarus. Fleet Admiral Okonkwo authorizes use of all necessary force. Rules of engagement are weapons free on all military targets. Civilian protection protocols remain in effect. May God forgive us for what we are about to do." Around the galaxy, human ships began to move. Not the cargo haulers and passenger liners that everyone was used to seeing. Different ships, warships that had been hiding in the dark spaces between stars. They moved with purpose, like pieces on a chessboard that had been positioned over years of careful planning. The Thrax military observer, a predator species that thought they understood war, watched the human fleet movements with his instruments. What he saw made no sense. "This is impossible," he said to his staff. "Our intelligence said humans had maybe 50 military vessels. I am tracking over 2,000 ships. Where did they come from?" His aide checked and rechecked the readings. "Sir, they are coming out of what looks like deep storage orbits around their outer planets. They have been there for years. Our scouts saw them but classified them as inactive defensive platforms. They were not inactive." "No, sir?" The Thrax observer felt something he had not felt in a long time. Fear. Not for himself, but for what was about to happen. He had been in wars. He had seen fleets fight, but he had never seen a fleet move like this. Every ship knew exactly where to go. They moved together like a school of fish, like a flock of birds, like a single creature with 2,000 bodies. "Open a channel to Earth," he said quickly. "Tell them the Thrax clans offer our support. Tell them whatever they need. Sir, the Council has not authorized anyone to join Earth's action." "I do not care what the Council authorized. I have fought enough wars to recognize what I am seeing. This is not a species that sometimes fights. This is a species that has perfected war and hoped never to use it. The Krevnath just made them use it. I want to be on the winning side." His message reached Earth. They thanked him politely and told him to stay away. This was humanity's response, and humanity would handle it alone. The galaxy watched and waited. 24 hours came and went. The Krevnath did not release the hostages. Then the countdown reached 0, and the galaxy learned what humans meant by Protocol Tartarus. The first sign that something was wrong came when the Krevnath orbital defense platform above their homeworld simply stopped existing. One moment it was there, a massive structure that had protected their planet for 300 years. The next moment it was expanding gas and debris. The defense commander had only seconds to wonder what happened before 17 more platforms around the planet met the same fate. Metal moving at 70% light speed does not explode like a bomb. It punches through matter and releases energy that turns everything into plasma. The kinetic weapons humanity had launched 4 weeks ago arrived within the same 10-second window. They had been timed perfectly. Across Krevnath space, 214 military installations were hit simultaneously. Shipyards, weapons factories, command centers, orbital defenses. Everything that allowed the Krevnath to project military power was targeted with mathematics and physics rather than explosives. No radiation, no chemical weapons, no biological warfare. Just velocity and mass and the simple laws of the universe doing what they always did. The Krevnath military went from confident to desperate in less than an hour, but the kinetic strikes were just the opening move. Before the debris had finished spreading, human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect coordination. 2,000 warships appearing in 200 locations at exactly the same moment. Every ship knew its target. Every ship knew its mission. There was no confusion, no delay, no wasted movement. The Krevnath war leader watched his tactical displays turn red with human contacts. His communications channels filled with panicked reports from bases, ships, and commanders across the Dominion. "How?" he roared. "How did they get so many ships here so fast?" His intelligence officer had no good answer. "Sir, their fleet composition does not match any known human designs. These ships are not in any of our databases. It is as if they built an entire navy in secret." That was exactly what Earth had done, while sending slow cargo ships through Krevnath space. While trading and talking and being friendly neighbors, humanity had been building weapons in the dark places where no one looked. They had built them hoping never to use them. They had hidden them because they believed in peace. But peace had died when the Meadowlark was attacked. Now there was only the mission. The first objective was rescue. Special operations teams inserted into Krevnath space on ships the raiders could not detect. Human stealth technology was decades ahead of anything the galaxy had seen. Ships that could hide their heat signature, their electromagnetic emissions, their gravitational footprint. They were ghosts, and they moved through Krevnath defenses like shadows through fog. The hostages from the Meadowlark were located within 3 hours. They were being held in a slaver facility on a moon orbiting a gas giant. The team sent to retrieve them consisted of 30 operators in powered armor. They went through the facility's security like it was paper. The Krevnath guards never understood what hit them. One moment they were watching prisoners, the next moment humans were everywhere. Non-lethal weapons dropped guards who did not resist. Lethal force eliminated those who did. The entire operation took 11 minutes. 554 hostages were pulled from their cells, given medical treatment, and loaded onto extraction ships. Among them was Emma Chen, who had watched her mother die on a screen. A human soldier, her armor scarred from entry combat, knelt down to Emma's level. "You are safe now," the soldier said, her voice gentle despite the situation. "Your mom was a hero. She saved a lot of people with her bravery. We are going to take you home." Emma was too shocked to cry. She just nodded and let the soldier carry her to safety. That was one facility. There were 37 others across Krevnath space where humans and other species were being held as slaves. All 37 were hit within the same 6-hour window. Every hostage was recovered. Every guard who surrendered was taken prisoner. Every guard who fought died. The Krevnath military tried to respond, but their response was chaos. Their command structure had been destroyed in the first strike. Their communications were being jammed by human electronic warfare. Their ships could not find human vessels until missiles were already incoming. It was not a battle. It was extermination. On the 4th day, the Krevnath war leader sent a message to Earth. He was ready to surrender. He would give back all prisoners, pay any compensation, accept any terms. Just make it stop. Earth's response was simple. No. The galaxy watched in horror as humanity rejected the surrender. The Zelani ambassador contacted Rodriguez urgently. "You must accept their surrender. This is becoming genocide. You have proven your point." Rodriguez looked at her with eyes that had not slept in days. "Have we? The Krevnath have raided civilian ships for 40 years. They have taken over 15,000 sentient beings as slaves. They have killed countless others. Every time they were condemned. Every time they promised to stop. Every time they did it again because there were no consequences. Now there are consequences. But you are destroying their entire military. Yes, so they can never do this again. To anyone, this is not justice. This is revenge. This is both," Rodriguez said quietly. "And it is necessary. The galaxy operates on acceptable losses. We reject that concept. There are no acceptable losses when innocent people die. If we accept their surrender now, in 10 years they will rebuild and other innocents will die. We will not allow that." The war continued. Human forces moved through Krevnath space like a surgical team removing a tumor. Every warship was destroyed or captured. Every weapons facility was dismantled. Every military leader was located and taken into custody. The operations were precise, methodical, unstoppable. The Thrax observer watched it all, recording everything. He had fought in 17 wars across his long life. He had seen species fight with passion, with rage, with honor. He had never seen species fight like this. Humans fought with cold efficiency. They fought like machines, but machines guided by purpose. They do not enjoy this, he noted in his report. There is no glory-seeking, no celebration of victories. They treat this like necessary work. Terrible work, but necessary. They are gardeners pulling weeds, surgeons removing disease. That is somehow more frightening than if they fought with hatred. On day 12, the last Krevnath military vessel was disabled. Their homeworld was surrounded by human ships. Orbital bombardment platforms pointed down at cities where millions of Krevnath civilians lived in fear. But the bombardment did not come. Instead, Admiral Okonkwo sent a new message. The Krevnath military is defeated. The Krevnath dominion is ended. Now comes judgment. Every individual involved in piracy, slavery, or murder will face trial. Every victim will receive justice. The Krevnath people will learn to live in peace, or they will learn they cannot live at all. These are your options. The galaxy watched and wondered what humanity would do next. They had won their war in less than 2 weeks. Now the harder part began. The human ships did not leave Krevnath space. Instead, they settled into orbit around the major worlds and began the work of occupation. This confused the galaxy even more than the war had. Conquerors either destroyed their enemies or enslaved them. That was how it had always been. Humanity did neither. On Krevnath Prime, human forces established what they called provisional authority. They took control of government buildings, communication systems, and infrastructure. But they did not touch civilian homes. They did not raid food supplies. They did not round up populations. Instead, they set up distribution centers where Krevnath civilians could get food, water, and medical care. The Krevnath people did not understand. They had spent their entire history being taught that other species were prey, that weakness deserved exploitation. Now these soft humans who should have been slaves were feeding them. It made no sense. In the central square of the capital city, humans erected a large building. Above its door, in both Galactic Standard and Krevnath script, were words, "Tribunal for Justice." Inside, humans set up courts. Not military tribunals where victors decided punishment for the defeated. Real courts with judges, lawyers, and rules of evidence. Every Krevnath captured during the war was being processed through this system. Their crimes were being documented. Witnesses were being called. Evidence was being presented. The Krevnath war leader was the first to stand trial. He was brought into the courtroom in restraints, but the restraints were removed once he was seated. Armed guards stood nearby, but they did not point weapons at him. A human judge, an elderly woman with gray hair and kind eyes, looked down at him from her bench. "You are accused of ordering attacks on civilian vessels, including the Earth transport ship Meadowlark," she said through a translator. "You are accused of murder, enslavement, and piracy spanning a period of 12 years. You will be provided with a defense attorney. You will be allowed to present evidence in your favor. You will have the opportunity to face your accusers. Do you understand these rights?" The war leader stared at her. Rights? He was defeated. Victors did not give rights to the defeated. This had to be a trick. "I understand nothing," he growled. "Why do you mock me with this theater? I lost the war. Execute me or enslave me. That is how this works." The judge shook her head slowly. "That is not how justice works. You will receive a fair trial. If you are found guilty, you will be sentenced according to the severity of your crimes. But you will be judged by law, not by anger." Over the following weeks, the trials continued. More than 3,000 Krevnath were processed through the courts. Each case was handled individually. Humans brought evidence, showed recordings, called witnesses. Some Krevnath were found guilty of terrible crimes and sentenced to long prison terms. Others, who had only followed orders with no direct involvement in atrocities, received lighter sentences or were released. The galaxy watched in amazement. The Zelani ambassador visited one of the trials and saw something that changed her understanding of humanity forever. A young Krevnath soldier, barely an adult by his species standards, stood before the judge. He had been part of the boarding party on the Meadowlark but had not fired his weapon. Witnesses testified he had actually tried to stop other soldiers from hurting prisoners. The human judge listened carefully to all evidence. Then she spoke. You were part of an attack that killed innocent people. You wore the uniform and carried the weapons. However, evidence shows you tried to minimize harm. You showed mercy when your commanders showed none. Therefore, this court sentences you to 2 years of supervised rehabilitation. You will learn why your actions were wrong. You will work to make amends. And when you have served your sentence, you will be free to return to your life. The young Krevnath could not believe what he heard. He had expected death or permanent imprisonment. Instead, he was being given another chance. Why? He asked. I was your enemy. You were a soldier following orders, the judge said. We do not punish people forever for being born into a bad system. We punish crimes and we offer redemption to those who can learn. That is justice. In orbit around Krevnath Prime, Ambassador Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the fleet's command ship with representatives from the Galactic Council. They had come to observe what humanity was doing. The Zelani ambassador spoke first. We owe you an apology, she said softly. We assumed you would take revenge. Instead, you bring justice. We are ashamed that we did not do this ourselves years ago. Rodriguez looked out at the planet below. The Krevnath raided ships for 40 years. Our intelligence has documented over 2,000 separate incidents. They attacked vessels from 73 different species. 15,000 sentient beings were taken as slaves. Thousands more were killed. Did you know all this? The Zelani ambassador looked down. We knew there were incidents. We thought they were isolated. They were not isolated. They were systematic. And the council did nothing because each individual incident was small enough to ignore. A ship here, a few dozen people there. Acceptable losses, you called them. Rodriguez's voice was hard now. We reject that thinking. We will never accept that any loss of innocent life is acceptable. He pulled up a display showing document after document. Incident reports. Distress signals. Pleas for help. All filed with the Galactic Council over decades. All marked as under investigation. All eventually filed away and forgotten. You maintained peace by allowing the strong to prey on the weak as long as they did not take too much at once. You let evil continue because fighting it was inconvenient. That is not peace. That is just slow-motion violence. The council representatives had no answer. They were seeing evidence of their own failure displayed before them. The Thrax observer finally spoke, his voice rough with emotion. You are right. We are all guilty of this. What do you want from us now? Rodriguez turned to face them. We want the council to establish real protection for civilian vessels. We want mandatory response protocols when innocents are attacked. We want laws with actual enforcement. And we want every species to commit to defending those who cannot defend themselves. You want us to be more like you, the Zelani ambassador said. No. We want you to be better than you have been. We do not want to be the Galaxy's police force. This war has cost us greatly, in lives and in resources and in the part of our soul that dies when we have to do terrible things. We do not want to do this again. But if we must, we will. The message was clear. Humanity had revealed their capability. They had shown they could wage war with precision and overwhelming force. But more importantly, they had shown they would rather build peace than wage war. The Galaxy had to decide which option it would force them to choose. Over the next months, the Galactic Council met in emergency sessions. They drafted new laws, new treaties, new enforcement mechanisms. They called it the Meadowlark Accords, named after the ship whose destruction had changed everything. Every species signed it. Even the Krevnath, through their new provisional government, agreed to its terms. The terms were simple. Civilian vessels were sacred. Attacking them would bring immediate and overwhelming response from the entire council. There would be no more acceptable losses. There would be no more looking away while the weak suffered. And everyone knew these were not just words. Everyone knew that if the council failed to enforce these laws, humanity would enforce them instead. On Krevnath Prime, in a prison that was cleaner and more humane than most Krevnath had lived before their defeat, the former war leader spoke with a human guard. I still do not understand you, he said. You could have destroyed us. Why show mercy? The guard thought for a moment. Because we are not fighting you anymore. We are fighting what you were taught to be, and you cannot fight ideas with bullets. You fight them with better ideas. The war leader did not fully understand, but he had time to learn. He had the rest of his life in prison to figure out why humanity was so terrifyingly different from every other species in the galaxy. 6 months after the war ended, Emma Chen stood on the surface of New Tasmania. The red soil beneath her feet was rich and ready for farming. In her hands she held a small tree sapling that had traveled with her family on the Meadowlark. It had survived the attack in the ship's greenhouse section. Now she was going to plant it. Around her, other survivors from the Meadowlark worked on building their new homes. They had completed the journey their families had started. Some of those families were incomplete now. Emma's mother would never see this place. 293 people would never see it. But the survivors were here, and they were going to make their dream real. Emma dug a hole in the red soil and carefully placed the sapling's roots into the earth. A human soldier who had been part of the rescue team helped her pack the soil around it. "Your mother would be proud," the soldier said quietly. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice to speak. She poured water around the tree's base and watched it soak into the alien soil. This tree would grow. It would have strong roots. And someday, when Emma was old, she would sit in its shade and tell her grandchildren about the day everything changed. Across the galaxy, other changes were taking root as well. Piracy had dropped by 89%. Raiders who had once preyed on weak ships now looked for honest work instead. The math was simple. The reward for piracy was not worth the risk anymore, not when humanity had shown what happened to those who attacked civilians. The Krevnath Dominion no longer existed. In its place was the Krevnath Federation, a new government supervised by human advisors. The Federation had no military beyond a small defensive force. They had no weapons beyond what was needed to protect their own space. They were learning to survive through trade and cooperation instead of raiding and conquest. It was hard for many Krevnath to adjust. Their entire culture had been built on strength and dominance. Now they had to learn different values. Some adapted quickly, others struggled. A few refused entirely and lived in the past, bitter and angry. One of those who adapted was the young soldier who had tried to show mercy during the Meadowlark attack. His name was Krevthor, and he was working as a rehabilitation counselor now. He helped other former soldiers understand why their old ways were wrong. It was difficult work, but he felt it was important. One day he was walking through a human section of the capital city when he saw something that made him stop. Human children were playing in a park. They were laughing, chasing each other, completely unafraid. Their parents sat on benches nearby, relaxed and happy. No weapons, no guards, no fear. Krevthor realized he had never seen anything like this in Krevnath society. Their children had been trained for combat as soon as they could walk. Their parents had always been watching for threats, for rivals, for any sign of weakness that could be exploited. Happiness had been rare. Trust had been impossible. These humans had come as conquerors, but they lived like this, without fear, without constant vigilance. They were strong enough to destroy the entire Dominion, but they chose to spend their strength protecting children's laughter. "You are seeing it too," a voice said behind him. Krevthor turned to see an older Krevnath, a former ship captain who was also in rehabilitation. "Seeing what?" Krevthor asked. "What we lost, what we never had. They are not stronger than us because they have better weapons. They are stronger because they know what to fight for. We fought for dominance. They fight for this." The old captain gestured at the playing children. "For the right to be weak sometimes. For the right to trust others. For joy." Krevthor watched the children a moment longer, then continued walking. He had a lot to think about. In the Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador Rodriguez was preparing to leave his post. He had served Earth for 30 years, but after the war he felt he had aged 100. It was time for younger people to take over. He was giving his final address to the Council. "When humanity joined this council 23 years ago, we came with hope," he said. "We believed in peace. We believed in cooperation. We believed that different species could work together for the common good. We still believe these things." He paused, looking at each of the council members. "But we have learned that peace requires more than belief. It requires commitment. It requires courage. And sometimes, it requires the willingness to fight." The Zilani ambassador, who had become a close friend despite their differences, spoke up. "Do you regret what happened? The war, the violence?" Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret every life lost on all sides. But I do not regret protecting the innocent. I do not regret ending a threat that the Council was unwilling to end. And I do not regret showing the galaxy that some lines cannot be crossed. Will humanity always be willing to fight?" asked the Thrax observer, now a full council member representing his species. "We will always be capable of fighting," Rodriguez answered carefully. "Whether we will do so depends on whether we must. We showed you what we can do. Now we hope to show you what we prefer to do. We prefer to build, to explore, to learn, to grow food on new worlds and raise our children in peace. We prefer to be your friends and partners. But if pushed, the thorax pressed. Rodriguez met his eyes steadily. Then you already know what happens. We hope never to be pushed again. The council session ended. Rodriguez walked out of the chambers for the last time. His replacement, a younger woman named Ambassador Chen, Emma's aunt, would take over tomorrow. She had earned the position through skill and dedication. She also had personal reasons to ensure that what happened to the Meadowlark never happened again. On Earth, in the deep underground command center, Admiral Okonkwo watched as the military fleets returned to their hidden positions. The ships would remain there, ready but unused. The weapons would be maintained but not deployed. Humanity would return to sending slow cargo ships through the galaxy, to trading and talking and being friendly neighbors. But now everyone knew what else humanity could send if needed. We won the war, her second-in-command said. But did we win the peace? Okonkwo thought about this. Peace is not won, it is chosen every day by everyone. We gave the galaxy a reason to choose peace. Now we wait and see if they make that choice, and if they do not, then we choose to defend peace. That is our burden and our duty. Far from Earth, in a space station near the former Krevnith border, the Zelani ambassador met with the Thrax observer. They sat in a quiet room, sharing drinks and discussing what they had witnessed. I still struggle to understand humans, the Zelani admitted. They showed such terrible violence, yet such careful mercy. I understand them now, the Thrax said, surprising her. We predators fight for dominance to prove we are strongest. You prey species fight for survival, to preserve your lives. Humans fight for principle. That is why they are so dangerous and why they are so restrained. What principle drove them? The simplest one. Protect the innocent. Every species says these words. Humans meant them. Every word. That is what makes them different. They say what they mean and they do what they say. The Zelani looked out at the stars. Do you think others will attack civilians again? Not for a long time. Perhaps not ever. Humans taught the galaxy a lesson. Some lessons need only be taught once. They sat in comfortable silence, two very different beings who had learned to respect each other through crisis. Outside their window, ships of many species moved through space peacefully. Trade continued. Exploration continued. Life continued, and somewhere in that vastness, human ships moved quietly through the darkness, watching, protecting, hoping never to be needed but always ready if they were. Earth appeared on view screens across the galaxy, a blue and white marble floating in the black. Peaceful. Beautiful. Home to a species that loved gardens and music and children's laughter. Home to a species that would burn the galaxy to ashes before allowing those children to be harmed. The galaxy had learned something important. Kindness backed by capability is not weakness. Restraint is not the same as inability. And some species, when pushed too far, do not break. They become something else entirely. Something ancient and unstoppable. Something that had always been there beneath the surface of civilization. Humanity had always been warriors. They had just preferred to be gardeners instead. The galaxy would be wise to let them keep preferring that.